Click. Hi everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Chaos Head, and I uploaded the what if scenario just before this, because one of the game's endings was in the last chapter. I suggest we continue on with the story. And apparently saving in chapter 7 does not crash your game. Yet. Though it would soon be midnight, the what the hell? The turnstiles of the subway's Hanzomon line were packed with people. The earthquake had led to enormous disruptions in the schedules of all forms of public transportation. And everyone passing through the turnstiles wore looks of unconcealed irritation. Watching them from the corner of his eye, Ban Yasuji checked the monitor in the station's attendance office. There had been a report from an attendant yesterday morning. When they first heard word that a high school girl was menacing someone with a colossal bladed object, the jurisdiction, alright, you gonna cooperate, mouth? The jurisdictional officers came running. By the time they arrived, however, neither the high school girl nor the man she had allegedly assaulted were anywhere to be seen, I hope. Yep. Upon hearing of the case by happenstance today, Bun got himself interested in the male victim's description. It nagged at him that several similar incidents had also occurred, which was why he had come here of his own accord at a time like this. It would seem that the altercation had been filmed in all of its detail by the security cameras. When he requested that the station attendant let him see the tape, the response was a pleasant yes. But it came along with a warning. It is a tad creepy. For the time being, he made the tape play back on the monitor. The picture was full of noise. It was probably due to the earthquake. He figured it had something to do with all that talk about how data on computers' hard disks had disappeared here and there. Determining who had been caught on tape would be a trial, given that it was barely at a level where he could see what was going on. A lone man appeared in the center of the picture. He stood still in the background, near the wall, along the right edge of the screen. Located a short ways away from the turnstiles, it was a place one wouldn't set foot in on the way to board or change trains. In fact, the other passengers only cut across the very front of the screen. The awful noise made it difficult to discern the man's appearance, but he was rather skinny and short. He wore a large rucksack on his back. Bun couldn't figure out what he was doing there. The music here is fucking sweet. After he fast-forwarded through about an hour of tape, a small change abruptly took place. Several of the commuters who had been cutting across the screen walked up to the man and halted. To Bun, it almost appeared as though they were being pulled in by the man with the rucksack. The mysterious part was how they showed no particular sign of starting a conversation with him. They stood in place and zoned out. Nor did the several people who had halted appear to be acquainted with each other. They were different genders and ages, with no common ground between them. What in the world was going on? When Bun gazed at the monitor, cocking his head, a single girl entered the screen. A long-haired high school girl in a Sume Academy uniform. She headed straight for the man with the rucksack, with the exact gait that came to mind when one thought of someone striding. Her movements were clearly different from those of the people who had stopped earlier. As a matter of fact, she pushed aside the loiterers and suddenly hauled the man up by his collar. That can only be one person, Senna. For some time, The two of them quarreled, or rather, it appeared more as if the girl was one-sidedly threatening him, acting as though this had recalled them to themselves. The people who had stopped there set off on their respective ways. At last, the girl flung the man aside. Retreating one step away from the man who had fallen on his bottom, she struck an odd pose. She leaned forward, lowering her center of gravity, and placed both hands together, close to the side of her hip. She appeared to be carrying something, but her hands were empty. The report had stated that she was swinging around a large bladed weapon, but where could she possibly be hiding such a thing? The answer soon became evident. Without warning, the camera shook. This wasn't a form of noise. The way the hair and clothing of passing commuters fluttered made it clear that the camera doing the recording was actually shaking. Bun's eyes ate into the screen. Before he knew it, the girl had come to be holding a gigantic sword, one longer than she was tall, though who knew where she had drawn it from. He rewound the tape and confirmed it one more time. No matter how he looked at it, it seemed that the sword had become floating up out of empty space. At least, the girl had kept her center of gravity low and stayed in place without budging an inch. The people captured in the monitor saw the sword the girl had materialized and burst into a commotion. But she took no heed of others' eyes. The rucksack-bearing man, on the other hand, was blatantly terrified. He desperately scrambled up and tried to run away, but the girl wouldn't permit this. Chasing the man with finely honed movements, she swung that enormous sword with ease. Like a fierce gale, the sword sliced apart the rucksack he was wearing. The force of the impact made him topple over. However, it didn't look like he'd been hurt. And in reality, the officer who came running to examine the scene after receiving a report about it had not found a single remnant of blood. As if she had heard his mutter, though it was a recorded tape, so she couldn't have, the girl suddenly turned toward the camera. The screen went slightly jumbled. The girl's form disappeared instantaneously, almost as if she'd never been there from the start. But the man-slashed rucksack remained behind as an undeniable mark of her presence. Though the visual noise made it hard to decipher, it was certain that she had vanished from the screen in less than a full second. Bun rewound the film again. There was nothing unnatural looking about the timestamp displayed at the lower right-hand side of the screen. In other words, this tape, it hadn't been edited. If so, how was one supposed to explain away that girl and her sword? Feeling as though he'd seen a ghost or something, Bun was left alone with his perplexity. In the midst of a perfect whiteness, I lay down. Oh boy, and you're going too fast for me. I felt soft, fluffy sensation of floating, but I didn't know whether or not I was levitating. I didn't have any sense of up or down, right or left. The silence was noisy in my ears. It was like hundreds of crickets were crying out in my head all at once. Oh boy. I wouldn't have experienced any doubts if someone told me that this was the world that came after death, for it was so. Monotonous, simple, tranquil, regulated, orderly, empty and peaceful. Maybe this was what it felt like inside the mind of a Buddha who had achieved enlightenment. It was vastly different from being in my head. I wanted to stay here forever, The aggravation, bitterness, and hollowness of reality. I didn't want to taste such things. Just as I taught this to myself, noise started flying into the white and previously soundless world. It was the sound of a door opening and someone's footsteps. They were drawing closer.
お兄、来たよ。いっしょ、いっしょ。お兄、お兄、今日ね、ママね、いいもの持ってきたんだよ。はい、これ、プレゼント。手編みの帽子なんだよ。すごいでしょ、すごいでしょ。もう冬だしね。ママね、帽子好きだから編んだの。使ってね。お兄、無視しないでよ。ああ、ご飯残してるじゃん。せっかくのカレーなのに。ちゃんと食べないとダメなんだよ。ねえねえ、病院のご飯って美味しくないって本当？でも食べないとダメ。起きろ、お兄。食べずに寝たら夜になってお腹空いちゃうんだから。
Someone's hand slid around behind my back, and they forced my body up. There, for the first time, I noticed that my eyes were closed. A little girl was there when I opened my eyes. She was Nanami, my little sister. But she seemed awfully small. How long ago was this? At least it must have been around when we were in elementary school.
はい、あーして。
The young Nanami dipped a plastic spoon into the curry and held it out toward me. I hit her spoon-holding hand and went on to inexplicably fling away the tray and the curry rested on, slamming it to the floor with my arm. Wow, you're a real fucking douche.
お兄、お行儀悪いんだ。お母さんに言いつけてやるぞ。
Nanami crouched to pick the hurled tray off the floor, then brought a dish rag from the sink in the corner of the room and began cleaning.
ほんと、世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないとなんにもできないんだから。
Stop it already. I covered my face with both my hands and slowly closed my eyes.
ごめんね。あなたを守ってあげられなくて。ごめんね。あなたを守ってあげられなくて。
As I took a breather after my drink, the door opened and a white-garbed nurse came in. I then understood that this place was a hospital after all. Her eyes went a bit round when she saw me. Apparently she thought I would be sleeping.
あら。西条さん、目が覚めたんですね。
She soon gave me a gentle smile. She was a model nurse. Speaking of which, I had a hunch that I'd seen her somewhere before. All right. She was the lady who'd been in the hospital when Dr. Takashi examined me. Takashina, sorry. All right, so let's reread that. All right. She was the lady who'd been in the hospital when Dr. Takashina examined me. What had been her name again? I couldn't remember, so I took a furtive look at the name tag on her chest. It said Hazuki. Yeah, Hazuki-san.
お体の調子はどうですか？
Hazuki-san held a thermometer out of me. The gesture came naturally to her. It just sort of ended up taking it. I just sort
体温を測ってくださいね。
fuck. If you speak to me that kindly, I'm not going to be able to do anything but meekly obey. My head was full of question marks, but for the first time being, I stuck the thermometer in my armpit. Immediately after, memories erupted inside my head. I remembered those events at the time. I'd given up on saving Nanami, and I'd seized at the wheelchair riding Shogun. But I didn't feel anything there, and what I found myself holding when I toppled over was a Darth Spider helmet. Count Darth Spider, the archetypical villain who appeared in the movie Spark Wars? His black swathed silhouette was famous even in Japan. But I had such a hard time thinking of Shogun as being Darth Spider cosplayer that it sent my wrath flying away, leaving me totally at sea. I got up and looked at the wheelchair. No one was sitting in it. A black hood was draped across the backrest. It too was part of the Darth Spider costume. I went on to survey the area, but no one was there. I was the only person who had been up on a pitch black roof. What the fuck? You scared the fuck out of me. Fucking eyes without a face, but inverted. The press corps came dashing up there simultaneously. They packed in around me without leaving a single gap, pointing microphones and spotlights at me. Well over 10 lights and microphones. Their excessive vigor almost terrified me. I wanted to flee, but I couldn't budge an inch. They mobbed me.
結局ニュージェヌの犯人は誰なのかわからないということですか？
そのダーススパイダーのヘルメットはアメリカ超能力と関係あるのかな。日常さん答えてくれませんか。これで終わりなんて言うなら電波ジャックですよ。
結局何がしたかったんです？ニュージェネに便乗した売名行為ですか？不謹慎だと思わないんですか？
ユーリ・ブライトマンさんとは最近話したかな。どんなこと話した？地震とニュージェネについて何か関係あると思いますか。
その手に持っている美少女フィギュアは何らかの儀式的なアイテムと考えていいんですか？
このような行動を取ったことにはアニメやゲームの影響はあったのかな。日常さん日常君
The lights aimed at me were incredibly hot. It felt much like getting my skin burned by the midsummer sun. The media people flooding in made it stuffy and my head went blank. My field of sight swirled around and around. Being driven into a corner, panicking, it hurt to breathe. I cradled my head. I couldn't see anything. I didn't want to see anything. I couldn't hear anything. I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't feel anything. I didn't want to feel anything. At the same time that I shouted, my consciousness cut off as though had been short-circuited. Well, that's fucked up. Yes, I'd lost consciousness. And we're going to save. Yeah. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.